Why the Detroit Pistons will shock everybody next year. The Pistons did a really nice job in both NBA free agency, but more importantly in the draft, where they were able to get both Jaden Ivey as well as Jalen Duren, which they would be adding to already a very young roster. And in my opinion, I think the Pistons are going to be a much better team this upcoming season than they were this previous year. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionative NBA content. And if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Detroit Pistons have been rebuilding for a couple years now, and due to that rebuild, they were able to acquire a couple different really nice young pieces that would be a huge part of their future long term. Now it seems like the Pistons were able to identify their franchise guy by drafting Cade last season with the #1 overall selection, which is of course the first and most difficult step to rebuilding. But they were also able to bring in a couple different other pretty nice young players as well, specifically Saddiq Bey. But fast forwarding to this draft, the Pistons were able to bring in a couple different really nice players, with the main attraction being Jaden Ivey. Now, even though the Pistons were able to do a really nice job at bringing in nice young talent, and in my opinion, both Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are going to be very, very good players going forward, that still doesn't mean that I think the Pistons are going to make the playoffs this next season or be a really good team in the Eastern Conference. Because in my opinion, I still think they're a ways away from the playoffs, and if they were to make the play-in tournament, I think that would be a pretty big achievement for them, and they would be somewhat overachieving. Really, when you talk about a young team like Detroit, the first and main thing that you want to see from these guys is just improvement each and every game, each and every month, each and every season from these young guys. And if they are able to do that over the years, then you would eventually expect a lot more as a team and expect a lot more wins, of course. But at this point, most of the players on their roster are very, very young players with limited NBA experience, and some of them, as the rookies are, of course, have no NBA experience, so it's not like you can expect all that much, at least in terms of team success, from the Pistons right away. Now, there's a couple different reasons for why I think the Pistons are going to be a much better team this upcoming season than they were this previous, but the first and most obvious is the play of Cade Cunningham. When Cade was going into the NBA, he had a ton of expectations and promise, and although he didn't necessarily have the best start to the early part of his rookie season, he did a really nice job at figuring things out, and towards the tail end of the season, Cade definitely was playing at a very high level and was living up to expectations. But in my opinion, we're only going to see improvement from Cade each and every season, and I expect going into this next season, we're going to see the best version of Cade than we ever had in the past. But for those of you who don't know, Cade does a really nice job at basically doing everything out there. He has the ability to hit a catch and shoot 3-point jump shot, he can sidestep and step back, he can also cross over into a 3-point jump shot. From that mid-range area, he also has a decent game, although he doesn't necessarily utilize it all that often, but he basically has all the same abilities that he did from that 3-point range in terms of catch and shoot, sidesteps, step back, crossover. He even has a pretty nice post turnaround fadeaway within his mid-range game, which is definitely a very valuable asset to have within your game, especially for a guy like Cade who has good size to him, but also has good athleticism and also has a good wingspan. But driving all the way to the basket, Cade is also very good. He uses his quick first step to drive all the way to the basket and finish over players with crafty layups, either his left or right hand. Also, as I mentioned, he's pretty athletic and certainly has the ability to posterize players at times. He also has a pretty nice floater when driving all the way to the basket. And overall, I would just say offensively, Cade is just a very versatile player that is only getting better as time does progress. But of course, a great thing about Cade is not only is he a phenomenal scorer, but he's also a phenomenal passer and playmaker as well, as he did average 5.5 assists this previous season. But even besides the numbers, it's pretty clear out there that Cade has a phenomenal understanding of the NBA game and has the ability to run an NBA offense at a very high level. Whether you talk about running the pick and roll or pick and pop, driving and kicking, or just running an NBA offense in general, Cade knows exactly what to do out there and makes his teammates' lives much easier. Now, the next reason why I think the Pistons are going to be a better team this season than they were last is a general NBA experience that a lot of their guys have gained from last year. Now, obviously, there are a couple players that they did draft this season that won't have that NBA experience, but I think due to the fact that guys like Cade Cunningham will have a year under their belt is certainly going to be a huge benefit to him, and certainly is going to be a huge benefit to a lot of the other young guys they have on their roster as well. And even for guys who weren't even a rookie last year, but just were young players, just having that extra year of NBA experience under their belt is obviously going to be a positive for them going forward. And I think more so than anything else, these guys are not only going to improve as individuals, but they're also going to improve mostly as a team. Because as I mentioned before, when you talk about young guys, maybe they have all the talent in the world, but when they're young and inexperienced at the NBA level, they don't necessarily know how to play as a unit and how to win as a unit. But now, as most of these guys do have experience under their belt, at least somewhat, that's certainly going to help them in that sense, of course. Now, the next reason why I think the Pistons are going to be a much better team this season than they were this previous is pretty obvious, but it's due to the increase in talent that they did add to the roster. Now, obviously last year, the Pistons had a couple really nice young players, but for the most part, it was pretty obvious that they weren't going to be a good team last year. And as I said, I still don't think they're going to be a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. I think that's pretty safe to say, but I think they did add enough talent in order to get them closer to a play-in spot at the very least and make them competitive to potentially make that play-in. But when you talk about guys that they drafted in Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duran, I think both of those guys are going to play major roles for the Pistons not only this season, but for years to come in the future as well, especially Jaden Ivey, who I personally think has all the talent in the world and has all the makings to become a potential all-star or superstar type guy going forward. But also when you consider the Pistons did add a couple other guys like Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, who of course do have talent and have some value, but probably the most important thing about those guys is they're going to provide veteran leadership that maybe the Pistons didn't necessarily have in the past. Because as a young player, having a veteran presence in your locker room is extremely important, because there's a ton of things that these young guys don't know and need to learn at the NBA level, and having a guy who can mentor them in their rookie season or in the younger years of their career is of course extremely important. And overall, even besides next season, I just think the Pistons have a pretty bright future ahead of them, considering they already identified their franchise player, or at the very least it seems like they found their guy. And when you identify that franchise guy, it becomes much easier to build a team around him. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening with the Pistons, not only this upcoming season, but just in the future as a whole. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Pistons will surprise a lot of people this upcoming season, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.